All right, so we think about the 7 wastes of lean manufacturing: transportation, inventory, motion, overproduction, overprocessing, and defects. Well, within those, there are a few that we could definitely tackle using the shadow board methodology, right? So within transportation, again, in production, it may be moving parts and materials from one place to another. So if you have a kitting card with a shadow board, it's just a nice way, a very efficient way to be able to go ahead and move those parts and those materials from one place to the next. Again, it's going to eliminate wasting time. Motion, when we're thinking about motion, maybe unnecessary movements of employees or machinery. If it's the case of employees, again, if you have a tool cart with all the dedicated tools that you're going to be using, then we no longer need to go looking for tools. Everything is in its place. So that is the idea, to go ahead and maybe incorporate a Kaizen shadow board into that particular area. When we're thinking about waiting for goods to be delivered, again, if this was in a kitting cart, this may have already arrived in order for the individuals to be able to work. And defects, think about broken parts or defective parts that may need to be reworked. Again, if you have these in a particular shadow foam board, then we are protecting these parts from being damaged, therefore eliminating some of those defects, which can again promote more weighting and then maybe even overproduction of parts. So within those 7 wastes of lean manufacturing, the shadow board is going to definitely help you create or eliminate a lot of those issues that may arise. When we're thinking about it, again, right, we're eliminating waste, right? It's a must for any industry to be efficient, to eliminate that waste. And like I mentioned, the 5S foam tools are just an excellent means of implementing continuous improvement principles. So within the benefits of using the foam, like I mentioned, we want to go ahead and use them while in transport. So protection while transporting goods, easy access. We're thinking about fully custom storage solutions that are thought of with comfort and ergonomics, right? We want to make sure that the individuals using these particular carts, these tools, whatever it may be, they're being accessed in a comforting and ergonomic way. And then again, they're just great for inventory management as well, right? So think about office supplies, things like that. So it's just a nice way to make sure that everything has its place and they're easily found. So for me, when it comes down to what the 5S foam board, the shadow board does, it just basically gives us a really good visual control. And to me, visual control is just a great way to save time in many different ways. So when we're getting started with a shadow board, it's all about basically deciding which tools, which parts or items you will need. So the first thing you want to do is gather all the tools to decide which ones will go on the shadow board. Think of it this way. In a hospital operating room, a surgeon should never have more than what is required to operate on the patient, nor should they have to hunt around for a specific scalpel, wasting precious time. So that's really what we're trying to think of when we're dealing with the different type of setups we can use the foam board for. So if it's a kitting cart, then lay out all the parts necessary on a table to get a clear image of the parts needed. If it's a tool cart, again, all the tools necessary to complete the day's task. Or if it's an office setting, all of the office stationary supplies that will need to be in that particular area. So a tip would be, if you have trouble figuring out what you use in a typical workday, a good exercise is to put in a box all the tools and parts that you use as the day progresses, and by the end of the day, you'll have a better idea of what's essential in your workstation, in your tool cart, in your kitting cart, or in your office stationary supply area, or really wherever you may see the opportunity to implement a shadow foam board solution. So we also have a chart that can help you get started. So we'll go ahead and put that up as well and share the link with you so you can go ahead and download it. And it's just going to help you understand what to choose depending on how many times a day you're utilizing a particular tool, for example. So as we begin to talk about the foam cutting tools and all of the accessories that we have available, the first one I want to mention is the long nose silver marker. This is the marker that we're using to go ahead and basically get all of the tracing done. So it's just great all around for tracing any part or item. The silver color, it just pops up nice and bold. The long tip is about 1.7 inches long, so it's just nice to be able to get into all kinds of nooks and crannies depending on the different tools and or the parts layout. And then there's the wide chisel tip, which is great again for longer cuts and things like that. A couple of the tips and tricks when using the marker, I would say first one is just to let it dry before starting to cut in order to avoid smudging the ink. So once you trace something, just give it a second for the ink to dry before beginning to cut. And then when it comes time to storing the marker, it's best to store the long nose bit in the down position in order to avoid having the marker prematurely dry. So in the down position, it's just going to keep the ink distributed throughout the long nose tip. So that's just going to help it when it comes time to using the marker. After that, we can go ahead and think about the thin knife. The thin knife profile is ideal for cutting all kinds of contours. It's also easy to get a specific foam depth with the retractable self-locking blade. And lastly, it just has a nice feel all around with the rubberized grip. So it's just really, it works really well. I'm a big fan of the thin blade. Again, it's just really easy to go ahead and work those contours and basically get nice clean cuts. We also have available the replacement blades. It's a 10-pack for the thin blades, and those are also available. And a couple of the tips and tricks for the thin knife would be to adjust the depth of the blade prior to cutting. Again, just this way, it's just you're going to be able to have a nice clean cut. And I think with the foam, it's all about that nice clean cut in the beginning to be able to get a good hold of the foam as you begin to peel it. So adjusting the blade according to the different parts or pieces that you're going to be introducing into the foam, that's definitely a plus when dealing with that blade. And also just taking the time to cut. So just don't rush it. Just take the time so it comes out nice and smooth. If you need to go over it again, go ahead and do so, just so that it gives you a clean cut, which will give us nice results when it comes time to removing or peeling the foam cutout. Along with the thin blade, we also have the utility knife. This one is a little bit bigger. This one is just more all around longer cuts. The utility knife is it's going to be really useful when shaping your foam board, when dimensioning your foam board, right? When you want to get, example, a 24 by 30 inch piece of foam board that you're going to incorporate into a particular work area or workstation or a cart, then this is just going to be a nice blade to go ahead and get the job done. It carries 2 extra blades, and we also have the utility blade 10-pack replacement available as well if you needed more. And when it comes time to using the U-blades, or rather the utility knife, I think it's really important to go ahead and just take your time to again make clean cuts and avoid speeding up the process, which can essentially maybe even damage the foam, if you will. If you want to speed it up too much, you may end up cutting more than you need to, and then you may need to scrap that particular material. So again, just take time to cut to avoid scrapping material. So that's one of the tips. And then the other one would be that the utility blade is essentially a really works really well, and it combines with the sled in order to be able to give nice, clean, perpendicular cuts when dimensioning your Kaizen foam. So it's just a great combination when you utilize it with the sled. From there, we can talk about the scraper. This is it's just a handy tool for flattening cutouts. Again, right, we're peeling off the foam. Sometimes we get the right depth in the beginning. Sometimes we may rip a little bit more than we wanted to. So now we want to go ahead and flatten that area out. So the scraper just does a nice job to flatten those cutouts. Once you've cut the shape and peel the foam, the scraper will go ahead and get rid of any leftover foam material. So again, it works really good for larger areas where there may be some imperfections that may happen when peeling the foam, especially when it's bigger shapes that you need to go ahead and peel out. Some of that may end up getting ripped in the process. So this is just a nice way to be able to flatten all those areas out. It's kind of like a cheese grater. So it's just gonna really be able to clean out those areas. You can use a brush to go ahead and brush off the debris, the excess out of the way. And a couple tips and tricks for the scraper would be, use it where it fits, I think. Try not to force it into smaller spaces where you may end up tearing or damaging the foam instead. So again, if you feel that if it's an area where it's just not going to fit and you're really trying to force it, you may end up cutting the foam or damaging, or maybe even having to scrap that foam just because you try to force it into a particular area. So again, try not to force it into a small space. And lastly, just take the time to peel the foam to reduce the amount of time you spend using the scraper to flatten out the bottom of your cutouts. So again, if you just take if you take time to go ahead and do a clean peel, then you may realize that you don't have to use this as much, but from time to time, you will need to use it. So it's nice to have it available. And it's just nice to go ahead and, again, if you need it to be able to flatten out a little extra section, then it's there to be able to do so. After that, we have the spinners. So the spinner tools are very very helpful. They're easy. They click into the any impact gun, and they're really also, again, intended to flatten out and smooth out any cutout. They definitely provide a good service when dealing with smaller spaces where maybe the scraper may not be able to get into. So this is where the spinners come into play. There's two sizes available. We have the 1.25" diameter and the 3/4 inch diameter as well, depending on the shape of your cutout. And like I said, they just do a really nice job cleaning out the cutout area, and they're just fun to work with. So a couple of tips and tricks for the spinners. Pay attention to the spinners. They can end up taking more material than you intend to remove if you're not paying attention. So work slowly. So don't get trigger happy and just let the drill run, because you're going to end up chewing up a bunch of material, a bunch of foam that you maybe necessarily not wanted to have done. So again, work slowly to make sure that you don't take more than you need to, and also work lightly. So meaning controlling the pressure you put on the drill to avoid taking more material than need be, right? Again, so if you're really heavy pressing down on that drill as you're using the spinner is just going to want to go ahead and essentially start to chew up and eat more foam than maybe you have you needed to take off. So it's just a good thing to think about. So again, work slowly, work lightly, and feel free to switch back and forth between the two sizes available when flattening your cutouts, right? So it's just a matter of understanding when and where you're going to need it. And essentially, once you begin to use the tools more, you'll realize that you use them all throughout, and there's no particular rhyme or reason. It's just that at the particular moment, you may need the smaller one or the bigger one, depending on what you're doing. So it's just a matter of understanding that. But again, they're also they're a little sharp, so be careful when using the spinners to avoid cutting yourself. So just keep your fingers away from the area where you're using the spinners, just to avoid any little accidents like that. But other than that, the spinners are very useful, and they do have a really good way of cleaning and flattening out those sections. But like I said, just make sure you work lightly and you don't press too heavy on that drill when doing so. The knife sled is one of the other accessories that is very useful. It's gonna house the utility knife, which makes it great for those straight cuts, right? The sled, it has a nice base that can be used alongside a straight edge, or you can use the notches on the front and back of the sled to guide yourself as you cut straight lines. So it's ideal for dimensioning the foam board, right? So getting those overall dimensions, those big shapes, the sled along with the utility knife are going to basically make sure that you get nice, clean, straight cuts every time. So you can use the sled by itself, or you can also go ahead and combine it with a straight edge if it makes it easier to cut a straight line. However, you do have the notches on the sled to guide yourself. Either way, it's going to give you a nice, consistent, straight cut. And another tip and trick would be essentially to make sure to rest the workpiece on a firm and stable surface and never on your lap or in the palm of your hand. Essentially, this is what's going to create a big issue and a big accident in the future, right? You may end up slicing your hand open if this is how you're cutting your foam. So make sure you have a workpiece on a firm and stable surface, and also make sure that you're able to essentially damage that work area, right? It should be a work surface that can be marked and cut, and it's not gonna be a big deal at the end. So it's something that we want to make sure we're aware of, so you're not end up damaging a really nice work surface that wasn't intended to be used in that particular way. So now let's go ahead and present a situation that may arrive, and that is when the process changes and you need to add a new part to the foam board. Instead of having to scrap everything already done, maybe it is a matter of removing just a section of the foam and replacing it with the new section where the new parts will be added to. So in this case, here we're going to measure the foam and cut a new piece to replace the old one. We then trace and cut out the foam to house the new part. All along, we have been using a combination of the various tools available, which prove to be of great use when wanting to incorporate a shadow foam board into any environment. So whether it's a tool display rack, a kitting cart, or office supplies, having these tools available will help promote the 5S principles throughout and help to include everyone, as this is just a great way for everybody to customize their areas according to their needs.